Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are really getting into the work of Frank Gehry, the mind behind some of the most complex, dazzling buildings out there.
Absolutely. Frank Owen Goldberg, born back in 1929, Canadian-American architect.
Yeah.
His name is just, well, it's synonymous with those buildings that look like they're defying gravity, isn't it?
Totally, like those cascading ribbons of titanium you see sometimes. You just know it's a Gehry.
Right. But that's the surface image, isn't it? The big, shiny, expensive spectacle.
Exactly. And our mission today is to dig deeper. We want to get past that whole Starchitect label, which, he famously hates.
He really does push back on that.
Yeah. We want to uncover the foundations, his philosophy. How did the guy who mastered these incredible complex curves actually start out celebrating like industrial grit?
Well, that's the core tension, isn't it? It's fascinating. His rise in the, 70s. It was built on mixing the totally mundane stuff like chain link fencing, raw plywood, corrugated steel.
Everyday stuff.
Everyday stuff, exactly, with these really dynamic, kind of radical forms. So it's an ideological deep dive, too, you could say. How does that desire for social responsibility end up causing a global architectural earthquake?
Right. So if you've ever stared at one of his buildings and just thought, how on earth did they even build that? Well, this deep dive is for you. We're going to try and unpack the process behind what looks like chaos.
And maybe the best place to start is, well, literally at the foundation, his childhood creativity, the scrap heap even.
The scrap heap. Okay, tell me more.
It's a great story, actually, because it explains so much about his lifelong thing with materials. Gehry often talks about his grandmother, Leah Kaplan. She was like his first design mentor.
Grandmother.
Yeah. On Saturday mornings, she'd keep him busy building these little cities out of scraps of wood, stuff swept up from the floor of her husband's hardware store.
Ah, okay, so that's the first piece right there. That connection between just playing, being creative, and using unconventional, cheap materials. It starts super early.
Exactly. And you can see why his early experiments used things like raw plywood and chain link.
Yeah.
They were just available, not fancy.
It makes sense. He had that spark, but finding his own voice, architecturally speaking, it wasn't exactly a straight line, was it?
Not at all. And just quickly, we should mention the name change. He went from Goldberg to Gehry in 1954. His then-wife, Anita, had concerns about anti-Semitism, especially as he was starting his career.
Right. Important context. Okay, so after USC, he goes to Harvard's Graduate School of Design in '56 for city planning. And this is where he really leans into this progressive, almost socialist view of socially responsible architecture.
At Harvard. It wasn't a good fit, apparently. He felt pretty disillusioned by the, let's say, academic establishment there.
Disillusioned how?
Well, he felt his ideas about social responsibility weren't really respected. And the story goes, the thing that really pushed him out, it's kind of legendary, actually.
Oh, do tell.
A professor apparently invited him to discuss some kind of secret architectural project. Sounds intriguing, right?
Yeah.
Turned out it was a design for a palace for the Cuban dictator, Fulgencio Batista.
Wow. Okay, so Gehry just walked away.
He walked away from Harvard. And you can see how that rejection of, I guess, architecture being complicit with power and wealth, how that would fuel his desire to use it more as a critique.
Which leads him towards treating architecture more like radical sculpture.
Exactly. Now, some people label his style deconstructivist, that movement focusing on fragmentation, nonlinear stuff, challenging traditional harmony. But Gehry himself, he always resists labels, focuses on the intent.
But the look, the aesthetic of his early stuff, it definitely connects to that California funk art scene in the 60s and 70s, doesn't it?
Oh, strongly, yeah. For anyone listening who doesn't know, funk art was pretty anti-establishment. It took cheap, found, everyday objects and elevated them. Made art out of industrial grit, basically.
That feels like a crucial link then, because Gehry's core idea, as he puts it, is that architecture is sculpture. Three-dimensional object, therefore sculpture.
Right. And if it's sculpture, well, why can't it use any material, regardless of how much it costs or what people usually think of it?
So him putting chain link fencing on his own house in Santa Monica, that wasn't just him being weird, it was a statement.
A deliberate provocation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like saying, why does architecture always have to be about luxury and classical rules?
Yeah.
It's that raw aesthetic. And yeah, some critics saw it as a real critique of consumerism.
And then he couples that rawness with really innovative uses of materials like titanium and stainless steel, especially in those famous curved forms later on. He wasn't just using raw plywood, he was showing that material choice itself could be revolutionary.
Precisely. And maybe nothing shows his rejection of formalism better than, well, his thing for fish.
Ah, yes, the fish. Okay, I've always wondered about that. It seems so random. Where did that come from? The fish lamps, the giant sculpture?
It apparently started in a conversation. He was kind of critiquing his peers, architects who were still just endlessly recreating Greek temples in classical forms. He felt they were stuck.
Right, right. And he hit them with that classic line about the evolutionary timeline.
That's the one. 300 million years before
Mhm.
man was fish. Why are you stopping at the Greeks? Basically asking, why limit your inspiration?
So the fish becomes this symbol for him of deep history, fluidity, moving beyond those rigid classical forms.
Exactly. It represents that kind of primal, flowing energy he wanted. And that led directly to the fish lamps in the mid-'80s, those things made of wire and broken plastic laminate. And then later, the huge El Pec sculpture in Barcelona, that giant steel fish.
It's quite a journey then, from building little scrapwood cities to engineering this massive anti-classical steel fish. And that really sets the stage for, well, probably the biggest economic story tied to a single building ever, the Bilbao effect.
Ah, Bilbao.
Yeah.
The Guggenheim Museum Bilbao, opened in Spain, 1997.
Yeah.
It's just instantly recognizable, isn't it? Those incredible curves, the shimmering titanium panels.
Totally. The New Yorker called it a masterpiece of the 20th century, and you can see why.
It looks like someone just took these giant metal ribbons and sort of dropped them into place. It's stunning.
And it completely changed the game, not just visually, but economically. That's where the term Bilbao effect comes from in urban planning, right?
Exactly. It's the idea that one piece of really iconic, innovative architecture can basically spark this huge cultural and economic revival for a whole city or region.
And the numbers are pretty staggering, aren't they?
Oh, they really are. In the first year alone, estimates put the economic boost to the Basque region at around 160 million US dollars,
Just from the museum.
just from the museum. And since it opened, over $3.5 billion added to the economy. It's like the ultimate case study for bold design as an investment.
Which naturally made everyone else want one. Cities all over started scrambling to replicate that success.
Which is why we see buildings like the Walt Disney Concert Hall in LA, those similar cascading titanium forms. It really did become a centerpiece for revitalizing that whole area.
And also the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle, MoPPA. That one was maybe a bit more controversial in its design.
Yes, MoPub definitely sparked more
Yeah.
debate, but all this success really launched Gehry into that starchitect category, even though, as we said, he hates the term.
Yeah, he keeps insisting, I'm only an architect. Rejects the whole celebrity thing.
But you can't deny the influence. He fundamentally shifted how cities thought about major architectural projects.
What's also fascinating, though, and maybe challenges that early raw aesthetic a bit, is how far his influence goes beyond just these huge civic monuments. I mean, he designed furniture, jewelry.
Oh, definitely. His career is incredibly diverse when you look closer.
Yeah.
Way back 1969 to 73, he had the Easy Edges furniture line, made entirely out of corrugated cardboard.
Cardboard furniture, like the packing material.
Exactly, taking that humble material and making something sculptural and functional. Then later he did the Betwood furniture line. And get this, each piece was named after a hockey term.
Really. A nod to his Canadian roots.
You got it. Yeah, but wait, you mentioned the challenge to the raw aesthetic.
Well, yeah. I mean, okay, he starts with cardboard and chain link, maybe critiquing consumerism, but then he collaborates with Tiffany & Co. on high-end jewelry collections, designs tableware for them, does a limited edition bottle for Hennessy Cognac. That feels like kind of a contradiction.
It seems like it, right? It's the big paradox of his career.
Mhm.
But the way he likely sees it, it's all consistent. For Gehry, the material isn't the main point. The sculptural intent is.
Okay, how so?
So whether he's manipulating cardboard or titanium for Bilbao or, golden diamonds for Tiffany, he'd argue he's applying the same artistic method, that same focus on sculptural flow, on nonlinear forms.
So the luxury materials are just another medium, like paint or clay.
Kind of. He's treating them as media for his specific kind of sculptural exploration. And he even applied that to sports. He designed the World Cup of Hockey trophy. Twice, actually. Redesigned it in 2016.
Huh. Okay, that reframes it a bit. It's not selling out, maybe, but extending the experiment. But those experiments, especially the huge curvy buildings like Bilbao, they required a massive technological leap, didn't they? How did they actually build stuff that seemed to ignore right angles?
Ah, now that is arguably his most important legacy, maybe even beyond the buildings themselves. The shapes he was designing. They were just too complex for the standard CAD computer-aided design software architects used back then.
Because normal CAD is all based on grids and straight lines.
Exactly. It couldn't handle the flow, the curves, that sort of shattered geometry he was doing.
So what did they do?
Well, his firm, Gehry Partners, they essentially had to spin off a whole tech company in 2002, Gehry Technologies. They developed this software called Digital Project,
Okay.
and they borrowed heavily from the aerospace and manufacturing industries. Those fields were already dealing with highly complex curves. This software finally allowed them to translate his really free-form sculptural designs into precise data that builders could actually use. It linked the vision to the reality of construction.
Wow. So basically, out of necessity, his firm kind of accidentally becomes this huge innovator in architectural software.
Pretty much. Solve the fundamental problem.
Hmm.
How do you build a sculpture that people can walk inside? It's a perfect example of his drive for innovation.
Okay, so we've got the materials, the sculpture, the economics, the tech. But let's circle back quickly to those early political ideals. The Harvard disillusionment. Did that progressive streak stick with him?
It seems so. Despite the global fame and huge budgets, he's maintained a real commitment to pro bono work, especially in Los Angeles.
Which connects right back to that idea of socially responsible design he started with.
Exactly. He's dedicated time recently to projects like the Children's Institute down in Watts
Yeah.
and the Youth Orchestra Los Angeles YOLO's Educational Center. Projects focused on community impact, using design to lift up neighborhoods, not just attract tourists.
So putting it all together, Gary's career is just full of these fascinating contradictions, isn't it?
Absolutely brilliant contradictions.
Yeah.
Starts with scrapwood cities, rejects the establishment, champions humble materials with this raw aesthetic, then engineers these massive, spectacular structures that literally reshape economies through the Bilbao effect.
He's the ultimate architectural maverick, always resisting labels, whether it's starchitect or deconstructivist. But I want to leave you, our listener, with one last little detail, something that I think really humanizes him and speaks to his integrity.
Ah, you mean The Simpsons appearance?
Exactly.
Wow.
He voiced himself in an episode back in 2005, designed a concert hall for Springfield. Huge pop culture moment, but he actually came to regret it.
Yeah, he did express regret, which sounds weird, right? Being on The Simpsons.
Totally. Why would he regret that?
Because there's this gag in the episode. He crumples up a piece of paper, throws it down, and says something like, "There's your concert hall." He felt that joke, funny as it was, created this huge public misunderstanding. It made people think his complex forms were just random, arbitrary, just screwing up paper, when in reality they were the result of intense, technologically advanced, sculptural engineered rigor.
Ah, so even at peak fame, he was protective of the actual process, the intellectual work behind the seemingly chaotic forms.
Fiercely protective.
Incredible. So here's the question for you to think about. How does an architect who got called the apostle of chain link fencing become the guy Vanity Fair called the most important architect of our age? What happens when an artist puts fun and sculpturally exciting experiences ahead of traditional rules and ends up changing architecture and economics forever? That's your deep dive challenge.